So Deltarune Chapter 5 is around the corner, and there's still a lot to talk about with Deltarune Chapter 4. For example, there's still a lot we don't know and haven't discussed about the prophecy. And one of the things that I think hasn't been discussed enough is Deltaruneism and the church. How the Lightners seem to worship a form of the fun game. And that's interesting, right? So that's what I wanted to discuss in this video. Deltaruneism as an organized religion, rather than an aspect of the prophecy or something that is provably true. I want to look at every single Lightner in Deltarune and discuss how much they know about Deltaruneism. Are they Deltarunists themselves? Do they know about the prophecy? If Chris and Susie walked up to them and explained their deal, would they understand what was going on? Do they have any connections with the prophecy, or any connections to the dark goings on in hometown? These are the basic questions I am going to be looking at in this video. And when I say every Lightner in Deltarune, I mean every Lightner in Deltarune. I have the wiki open with a list of all of the Lightners, and we are going to go bottom to top. Why bottom to top and not top to bottom? Well, the wiki appears to be organized by first appearance and location. It does mean a lot of the NPCs that are important show up first, and discussing the important NPCs requires a little bit of context. So I want to get some of the less important NPCs out of the way so that we can discuss some of the concepts that I want to elucidate before you get into the real meat. And you'd click off this video if I started with Alphys, Birdley, Noel, Chris, Susie, and then started talking about Milk Freak for an hour and a half. And we're starting off strong with Lightner number 1. That's right, it's Scarf Mouse. So the main thing we know about Scarf Mouse is that they were Chris and Noel's babysitter while growing up. And spoilers for Chris and Noel, but they're both Deltarunists, their families are. And it's not unheard of that religious families tend to like to hire people with a similar religion to them when taking care of their kids, even just as a way to slightly vet who is taking care of their kids. But it's also a small town, and everybody knows everybody. So this might just be a case of friends and family, oh, Scarf Mouse is good. You should have them watch the Chris and Noel while you guys are out throwing key lime pies or whatever. And so that brings me to the first big concept that I want to talk about in this video. Is Deltaruneism a big religion or a small one? Because if Deltaruneism is a big religion, it's not unreasonable to assume that by default, most of the Lightners will be Deltarunists. But if it's like a small religion, then it is less reasonable to assume that most of the Lightners are going to be Deltarunists. Just keep that in mind as we go forward. As for Scarf Mouse, I think that Scarf Mouse, this is just a vibe, but I think he's probably at least casually a Deltarunist. Likewise, they probably have a broad overview of the prophecy, maybe not the specifics. So that means if Chris and Susie walked up to her, she probably wouldn't know what was going on, especially if they didn't use the exact words and just explained the vibe. I don't think they're in the prophecy. I can't find any references to mice or scarves. They're probably not a religiously significant character. When it goes to the strange goings on in hometown, Scarf Mouse has no idea what's going on. Even in the weird route, when Noel goes, "I'm not scared of you," they're more like confused. So no, they're not part of the evil group chat. NPC number 2 is the Manticore. This is the Lightner that bears a strong resemblance to Jade Harley from Homestuck. If you remember, she is outside of the flower shop. There's less to say about Manticore than there even is for Scarf Mouse. She is over by the flower shop in chapter 4, and her only notable thing, she talks briefly about Asgore's foibles with business and says the line, "Well, I hope for your sake he quits being so obsessed with that stuff." We'll talk what that stuff means a little bit later when we get to Asgore, but it does indicate that she's skeptical about the realness of Deltaruneism. So I think it is safe to say that Manticore is not a Deltarunist and seems slightly skeptical about the whole thing. She might know about the prophecy, but if Chris and Susie asked for help, she probably wouldn't believe them. There's no real tell of anything Manticore related in the prophecy, so probably not. And as far as we can tell, she is unconnected to the strange goings-on and probably wouldn't take it very seriously anyways. A 6 out of 10. Moving on to the next character. You know him, you love him. He's mean, he's green, he drives a very slow machine. It's Snail Guy. So there's not a lot to say about Snail Guy. He's not at church, and he makes no mention about Deltaruneism or the prophecy. He does have a car, so he could be going to a different church outside of town if he subscribes to a different denomination or something. But I think it's pretty safe to say that Snail Guy isn't a Deltarunist, knows nothing about the prophecy, could not help Chris and Susie if they asked. Maybe he could give them a ride somewhere. He would not understand what's going on, has no connection to the prophecy, and has no connection to the darks going on. I would rate it 1 mile per hour in a 60 mile per hour zone. Next on the chopping block is driver number 2. He makes poor financial decisions and sits in his car. That's right, it's Scared Donut Guy. So at first glance, there doesn't seem to be a lot to talk about with Scared Donut Guy. He is not at church. He does have a car once again, so he could be going to a different church farther away, but he also makes no mention of the prophecy whatsoever. So we can say that he is probably not a Deltarunist, and he probably doesn't know anything about the prophecy. Once again, he could probably give Susie and Chris a ride if they were in trouble. And he doesn't seem to be in the prophecy, but when it comes to the dark goings-on, there's something different about this one, right? Because he's a goner. I mean, at least there's a goner shaped exactly like him. If you don't know what a goner is, they are the enigmatic followers of the equally enigmatic Dr. W.D. Gaster in Undertale. This name will keep popping up, folks. Keep an eye out. And of the Gasteric influences in Hometown, I think he might be the least influential. He doesn't seem to be limiting your path or pushing you onto dark secrets. So let's give him 3 overpriced donuts out of 10. So while I was recording this, Chapter 5 did get announced, so we're gonna pick up the pace a little. Moving on, it is not to be confused with Scarf Mouse, it's the Scarf Girl. This was the newspaper editor in Undertale, and she has borderline no relation to the prophecy, no relation to the dark deeds. She has like 2 lines of dialogue in the entire game. I rate her 1 misspelled library sign out of 10. In Undertale, he has an alienated relationship with his son. That's right, it's Snowdrake's father. Snowdrake is the first on this list to be a confirmed Deltarunist. You can see him in church. Look, he's right there. He's a member of the choir, so he sings a lot. Isn't that cool? Does seem like he has a better relationship with his son in this one, so that's nice. This is also the first piece of evidence that Deltarunism might be pretty big, because Snowdrake's father has an accent, indicating that he might not be from Hometown originally. So there's probably institutional support for Deltarunism. Tally that up as 1 for big religion. Now, in terms of dark deeds, I don't think they're letting in Snowdrake's dad into the evil group chat, do you? In terms of help, he would probably believe Chris and Susie, but there's not a lot he can do. I mean, he has ice-based magic, and we know that can end up pretty strong. But in Undertale, the Snowdrakes are early game pushover enemies, so I don't know if they're strong enough to solo the night or anything. And I give Snowdrake 12 Brooklyn accents out of 19. Moving on to the ultimate duo. They're here, they're queer, and we're doing them both together. That's right, it's Royal Knights 1 and 2. So the Royal Guards just up and tell you that they're not religious, but they do go to church. I also think they seem like generally good dudes and probably would help out Chris and Susie if they were in a jam. They might not believe that something supernatural is happening, but they'd probably follow some distressed teens if they seemed like they needed help. They're also physically fit, so I think they could probably put up a bit of a fight, and I don't think these guys are evil. Let's be clear. I would give these two 5 delightful relationship goals out of 5. Before we stop talking about these guys, did you know that these guys canonically have, like, a species? Yeah, this one's a rabbit and this one's a dragon. The more you know. Moving on, we have a menace to rain puddles everywhere and one of the only Blorbos to actually have a name. It's Rainy. Rainy is not involved with the plot. Listen, look, I cook a lot. The Rainy's not involved with the plot. He's like the joke character of joke characters. Although he claims to be a kid, but he doesn't have a striped shirt. Maybe he is evil. Let's give Rainy 7 raindrops out of 0 striped shirts. We're doing another double. It's gonna be the rabbits. It's gonna be Rabbit Girl and Rabbit Kid. You remember these freaks from Undertale, right? Well, now only the sister's a freak. No plot relation. 1 uncomfortable conversation out of 10. Moving on. Harry, he's cooler than Jerry. No plot relation. Moving on. I give him 2 seconds longer than I should have given him. Out of 10. He works at the pizza store. Or does he? This guy is as ominous as he is inscrutable. That's right, it's Purple Guy. So there's not a lot to be said about Purple Guy. He probably isn't a Deltarunist, and I cannot imagine that he is in the group chat, right? But he's also the first of the pizza employees, and the pizza store is interesting, right? The pizza store has a mascot. That mascot is Icy, and Icy is something that appears in Sans' word search in Undertale, and Icy also appears in a few of the fun events. If you don't know about the fun events are a series of events that are randomly generated in Undertale, and they all appear to tie back to Gaster. There's a whole creepypasta vibe around Icy, right? In fact, Chris and Noel, as kids, are scared of Icy according to the Spampton sweepstake. And the creepy vibe of the institution doesn't help that there is a guy named Purple Guy running around. And if you're like me and haven't actually played Five Nights at Freddy's, spoilers, Purple Guy is a serial killer who kills children in a pizza store. I don't know if it'll tie into the grander mystery in any way, but there's something off about Icy's and Purple Guy. I'm just saying, Chris and Susie probably shouldn't ask him for help. And I'll give Purple Guy 87 bites out of 90. He, underwater menace, he has no friends in either dimension. That's right, you know him, you tolerate him. That's right, it's Onion. Now for someone interesting. Onion. Onion is not a Deltarunist. He seems barely aware that society exists. No, that's not what makes Onion interesting. I think we all know what makes Onion interesting. Because the interesting part of Onion is that he's gone missing. When you start on Onion's quest, he mentions that he hears something coming from the deep. And he says he's gonna go check it out. And he simply does not return in chapters 3 and 4. Even though you can go out of your way to look for him. Well, you can stand at the shoreline. It's kind of going out of your way. Now, I have a lot to say about the deep and the related concepts that I will not get done by the time chapter 5 releases. The number one thing that I want to talk about in this video is that it's low-key a religious concept, right? Like, when Gerson puts on his secret boss outfit and begins to fight you, he asks you if you could hear the song singing from the deep. And Gerson, in my opinion, is a holy man. Of all of the characters that we see, he is the most religious, with maybe the exception of like Alvin. We'll talk about Gerson when we get to Alvin, but that's interesting, right? Onion hears a religiously themed concept happening, goes to check it out, and it just disappears. Is this tied into the dark dealings? Yes, like we don't have proof, but yes. Now there's a chance that Onion returns in Chapter 5. Maybe in some sort of evil gas-derized form. Ooh. But we'll see. I could be the wrongest person who has ever lived. I give Onion 1 friend out of 1. Miss you, buddy. Please come back home. Up next on the docket. You know them. You're aware of them. I'm just gonna spoil it right now. They have no effect on the plot. It's the 3 ice caps. The 3 ice caps are literally just there to make Terry cooler than Jerry. They have nothing to do with anything. Although now that I think of it, they are actually in front of the church, which means they could actually be in the Deltarune religion. Non-zero chance. They're not a church though. I give them 0 hats out of 10. Next up is a literal child. We've not seen them leave their house, but they're still a character. That's right. It's the innkeeper's child. So obviously this is a literal child. So they probably don't have a religion unless it's their parents' religion. That's just how it works. Likewise, they probably aren't in the evil group chat. If they are in the evil group chat, I have many questions. I give innkeeper's child 6. Where is the innkeeper out of 7? Next up on the list is one of the ghosts. It's Mad Ghost. Mad Ghost doesn't have a lot of dialogue in this game, so they're probably not related to the plot in any way. Let's give them a 1. You know what's coming up next. Out of 10. The next up goes by many names. Nobody. Somebody. Or you may know them as Mettaton if you played Undertale. That's right, it's the ghost known as Nobody. Their name is technically Nobody, but I'm gonna call him Mettaton because he's Mettaton. I'm just gonna talk about all of the ghosts just real quick. They're probably all not Deltarunists. 1, because they're not at church, and 2, because they're transgender. And transgender people and the church have had a little bit of a fraught history. Another reason why Mettaton probably isn't a Deltarunist is because they haven't transitioned into their ideal form yet, so they don't like leaving their house. So they're probably not taking regular visits to the church. Here's the question. Are they related to the dark deeds going around town? So my gut is telling me no. But the day before you fight Tenna, they just so happen to ask if you have any spare entertainment devices just laying around, you know, like tomorrow. So are they manipulating us and Chris into fulfilling the prophecy? Or is this just a natural byproduct of the prophecy pushing people into the direction of fulfilling it? Either way, Mettaton has a role to play in the future chapters. I wonder what he's going to do in chapter 5. Let's give Mettaton 10 out of 10. He deserves it. Next up is the first enemy you ever see in Undertale. That's right, it's Frogget. Now, Frogget is great, but Frogget also appears 2 times in Deltarune, and one of the times Frogget doesn't talk. In my headcanon, Frogget is a Deltarunist, but there's no textual proof, and probably not evil either. Let's give Frogget 1 out of 1. Woo! Next up is my favorite pun in Undertale. That's right, it's Looks Eyewalker. Eyewalker has less appearances than Frogget, and they only really talk about Asgore's flower shop and how the back door is closed. But that is a hint, and I'm going to talk about this more when we get to Asgore. But Asgore's flower shop is named Flower King Flowers, right? Flower King is an explicit reference to the prophecy, and the prophecy didn't just start existing in chapter 4 when we learned about it. So that means Asgore named his flower shop after the Bible. So if Lux is buying from the flower store, he could be a Deltarunist. Business Manticore also could be. I completely did not consider this fact when I was writing her section. As for their relationship to the dark deeds, I don't think they're very suspicious. They could be like trying to point you towards Asgore and like influence you, but that seems unlikely. Next up is in a figure of a relatively intense scrutiny. One of the few ex-knight candidates. That's right, it's Father Alvin. So I have a lot to say about Father Alvin. First of all, yes, I believe he is a Deltarunist. There are some subtle signs that I don't know if you've picked up on. First hint is that he is seen at and around the church in a few of the chapters. The second hint is that he's kind of dressed like a religious person, right? And the third hint is that he's the pastor of the Deltarunist religion in Hometown. So it is pretty subtle, but I do think that he's related to Deltarune in some way. I think this is the perfect opportunity to come back to whether or not Deltarunism is a small or a large religion. So I think the first hint is that there's only one religious institution in this small town. It's the church. So that's a point towards it being large. But here's something that stood out to me for a while. In chapter 1, when you're talking to Alvin, he mentions that Asriel came to him to confess his sins. But the Deltarune religion doesn't have the concept of sinning. And that started to spark something, because there's some odd things in Deltarune that I've talked about a little bit, but I want to lay out in clear, concrete terms. So, Christmas is a thing in Deltarune. I think this is unarguable, and it's not a thing in Undertale. This is a little bit more arguable. And likewise, the characters have knowledge of things like sinning, even though it's not part of Deltarunism. So I think that there is a human religion that is something like Christianity, and that Deltarunism is sort of an offshoot of that religion. Think like Mormonism to Protestant Christianity, or maybe it was the more original one, like Judaism to Christianity. Am I confident of this? No, not at all. That's why it's in this video and not a standalone thing. But it's probably going to be important for my analysis, so if I seem crazy, it's because I'm crazy. But let's move on, shall we? Because I would also like to say that he's totally part of the conspiracy as well. 1. On the bunker, there's the Deltarune code, and it heavily implies that a religious authority in Hometown has that code. He also canceled choir practice. Like, why are they shutting down choir practice? It's indoors. A little rain isn't going to hurt anybody. Next, and I think the most damning, is that he dug up Gerson's corpse and put it in his study so that he would be revived in the Dark World. I think it is safe to say that Gerson knows what's going on. Is he aware of the Gaster side of everything? Probably not. But I think he knows about the Dark World, and I'd be a little surprised if he didn't. I think those are the main things that I wanted to cover about Alvin. So let's get Alvin one minor bundle of mysteries out of many large bundles of mysteries. And just a quick note, if you're liking this video so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've worked pretty hard on it. We've got more coming, especially with Deltarune Chapter 5 coming out. So you might want to stick around for some tasty morsels. And in this corner, he's not technically a lightner, but he once was. Give it up for Gerson! So by every account, Gerson was a Deltarunist, and incredibly so. He even wrote Lord of the Hammer, an entire series based off of the prophecy. And I've heard a lot of people talk about Lord of the Hammer like it's a Lord of the Rings XP, but it's Narnia, right? It's an allegorical book about the religion of the creator. So just keep that in mind, right? And I think Gerson died before the whole conspiracy got set up. I just get that vibe. And if we look at his actions in the Dark World, even if Carol walked up to him and explained the situation and tried to get him to join, he would probably say no. He turns down the Shadow Crystal after all. And for that, we're going to give Gerson 97 hammers out of 98. Keep on keeping on. He loves crunching bones, his daughter, and being a feminist. That's right, it's Mr. Kattenheimer. Kattenheimer is obviously a Deltarunist. You see him in church. The whole family is in church, save one. And I get the feeling they're kind of devout about it, too. So they probably know quite a bit about the prophecy, but they're probably not in on the dark side of any of this stuff. They're just too delightful to be. And he gets a B+. Next up is Lord of the Ocean, the ever-enigmatic Clam Guy. Is Clam Guy a Deltarunist? That's a great question. We don't know enough to say, but on the conspiracy side, Clam Guy seems very similar to Clam Girl from Undertale. And Clam Girl was one of the very obvious goners in the game. And it kind of seems like goners have the ability to change their color. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more upcoming, but I think Clam Guy and Clam Girl are the same person, just taking on different colors. And do you know the only time you meet Clam Guy? He clues you in to the Onion quest. Tells you to come back yesterday if you wanted to see Onion and start the quest. So the real question is, why are the goners pushing you to do Onion's quest? That seems odd, right? Gaster wants us or Onion to look into whatever is happening beneath the waves. That's interesting. Maybe Chapter 5 will have some hints. Otherwise, let's just give Clam Guy 7.5 out of 897. Moving on, she's an endless font of positivity. That's right, it's Catty. That's C-A-T-T-Y, not C-A-T-T-I. Catty, she's a Deltarunist, obviously. While she's also not super plot relevant, I think it is worth noting that when she describes what she thinks one of the heroes of the prophecy looks like, she describes Rouse. So she knows something, or at least has really good intuition. Likewise, I don't think that she's in any of the many conspiracies going on. Just because, like, I don't know if you could trust her to keep her mouth shut. Girl loves to spill the tea. So let's give her one reasonable amount of cat treats out of an unreasonable amount of cat treats and move on to... She's borderline the same as Catty, but an alligator. That's right, it's Bratty. Even though Bratty's in church, she specifically says that she's not very religious, and she doesn't seem like the type of person who'd know a lot about the religion in general. She kind of seems like she's got a lot going on. Likewise, I think Catty could probably, like, know a person who's in the conspiracy. I don't even think Bratty's, like, conspiracy adjacent. And on a side note, I still think it's a little messed up that she is catfishing Burger Pants while having an adorable romance plot of her own. Like, I get that Burger Pants and Ice Cream are gonna end up together and it's all gonna work out. You know, it's bad vibes. It's not a huge deal, but it will knock a few points off of my very official ranking. And that will bring us to said ranking. Her official ranking is a few points less than it would have been out of 100. And that brings us to next up on the list. I know him, I love him, and I have some very crazy opinions on him. That's right, it's the annoying dog. So I have a lot to say about the annoying dog, which is why I literally have already put out a 20-minute video on specifically the annoying dog's relationship to Deltarunism and the prophecy. If I'm good at technology, you should be looking at a thingy-majig that'll take you to that video if you're curious. It's a good video. I think it has a theory you've probably not heard before. But needless to say, I think the dog knows a lot about Deltarunism, seeing as it is literally Toby Fox's avatar, the creator of Deltarune. Likewise, he's probably aware of most of the conspiracies going on. He's the avatar of the writer. I give the annoying dog, watch my other video when you're done with this, out of 10. Next up is the noted hater of wave dashing. That's right, it's Mrs. Boom. So Mrs. Boom, we don't know her relationship to Gerson or Alvin, but there has to be one. She works at the library, she's a Deltarunist. Is she related to the conspiracy? Probably not. Let's give her one old person out of 10. Moving on to someone that people actually gaff about. That's right, you know him. You love him. That's right, it's Papyrus. So we don't know a lot about Papyrus Roaring Knight Deltarune. We don't even know if it's Papyrus at all, or if it's Time's New Roman, Sans' third brother, who just hasn't been mentioned up until now. So we really can't say anything about Papyrus except for Toby, give it to us, Toby. Toby, I swear, Toby, give us Papyrus in Chapter 5, Toby. Let's give Papyrus one very normal out of 98. Up next is my Blorbo of choice. He loves milk and everything related to it. That's right, it's the Milk Looker. Genuinely, this guy is my favorite of the weird little freaks running around hometown. I can't get enough of the guy who looks at milk. I'm gonna be calling him the Milk Freak instead of Milk Looker. It's a better name. Is Milk Freak a Deltarunist? I don't know. I don't think so. He's not a church. He also doesn't give the vibe of a person who would be particularly solemn during any interaction.
section. And the only conspiracy he's involved with is the conspiracy to have stronger bones and teeth. So let's give Milk Freak a perfect 100 out of 100 and keep on keeping on. 2, I have a pretty good working memory of this game, and I still barely know anything about this guy. It's Diamond-Headed Boy. Diamond-Headed Boy is one of the characters of all time. In Undertale, he's a fan of Metaton, so when Metaton becomes a character, we might get a tiny bit more of Diamond Boy. Other than that, I don't think he's a Deltarunist or involved in the plot whatsoever, so let's give him 4 points out of 8 and keep this train a-rolling. And a-rolling we will be right on to one of the most legendary characters in all of video games. He lost a sexiest Tumblr man contest to Reagan Arasaka. That's right. The man, the myth, the legend. It's Sans Undertale. I would say gallons of ink have been spilled talking about Sans Undertale. And we're probably not going to come to any conclusions about what Sans knows until we're far into Deltarune, I think. So let's talk some possibilities, shall we? So the first thing that we know is that Sans was in Deltarune before he was in Undertale. I think that is pretty textual. He also says in Undertale during the genocide route, our reports saw timelines stopping and starting left and right. I think this gives 2 distinct possibilities. The first is obviously that Sans is from Deltarune, and something that he learned during Deltarune will send him to Undertale, and everybody's gonna learn it. So that's the R in that situation. The second situation is that he is not from Deltarune, and he operates as some sort of timeline police. So let's see if there's any evidence for any of the sides. So I do think it is extremely suspicious that Sans just moved to hometown at the very beginning of Deltarune. Like, yeah, you just start showing up right around when a time-traveling soul inhabits the body of a teenager. And on that note, Sans is the only grocery store operator in hometown, right? Where did they get their food before? I guess from outside of hometown. Does that mean hometown is a food desert? Putting that aside, if he is a time cop, then he would have come here using that as a pretext to investigate our time-traveling shenanigans. Of course, there is another organization he could belong to. You know the one. Is Sans working with Gaster? I mean, they're probably related, right? So it's not inconceivable that they're working together. Now that I think of it, imagine that he is working for Gaster doing something evil, but he actually meets Toriel just like normally and like falls in love with her. And that's the tragedy, is that he's trapped in Undertale, away from her, and she's got her whole thing going on in Undertale. Long story short is I have no clue how much Sans knows in Deltarune. Less than in Undertale, I can tell you that. So let's give Sans 1 Megalovania out of Undefined. Next on the docket, I don't like this guy's vibe, and I don't like this guy's style. That's right, it's Briefcase, dude. So we're going into the politician section, but not that politician. She's gonna be at the end. Anyways, Briefcase Guy. If Milk Freak is my child, I love him. I do not love Briefcase Guy. He is my anti-Blorbo. So let's do this quick. He's probably not a Deltarunist, but he might do it for political reasons. I don't know if he's in on the conspiracy, but he is adjacent to politics, and politics seem to be kind of important for the conspiracy. We'll talk about it more with the character I care about. Let's give this guy -10 out of +10 and move on. Next up, she works for the mayor and is just a hand. That's right, it's the hand receptionist. I don't know if any of the politicians in the politic building follow Deltarunism, but if anybody's gonna be in on the conspiracy, it's the hand receptionist who works for Mayor Carol.
Why she just tells Chris that Carol keeps everything in her house is a little beyond me. Or maybe she figured Chris was in on it too and doesn't know about the whole soul situation. Let's give the hand receptionist 5 fingers out of 10 and swing on up to the next one.
Up next, it's gonna get Grizzly. Who let a wild animal into politics? That's right, it's Politics Bear. Once again, Politics Bear. Probably not a Deltarunist, unless, you know, politics in the area require you to be fairly religious. And he's beginning to get disillusioned in politics. Is that because he learned about the dark conspiracy going on in hometown? Probably not. It's because he's standing around doing nothing. And let's give Politics Bear an approval rating of 23%, a record high. So that brings us to the strongest of the Pizza Men. He burnt his hands doing something foolish. That's right. You know him. He's the warrior. So the warrior doesn't go to church, but I think he's probably a Deltarunist, like a LARPer. Like he's got his whole warrior aesthetic going on. He's probably doing the Middle Ages, I fight for the church type thing. But if you asked him any specific questions about the prophecy or what it entailed, it would be largely incoherent. In terms of conspiracy, the warrior is not connected to Gaster and probably isn't connected to Carol. But I think there's one individual that he's connected to. That's right, it's Icy. A lot of the Icy employees have extreme behavior and are a little off. It's more of that Icy's creepypasta feeling that it has. But I digress. Let's give the warrior 2d6 hit die and move on. He loves to work in food service. Couldn't be me, folks. And he also loves a certain burger pants. That's right, it's Blue Ears. So Blue Ears is probably not a Deltarunist, or at least not a very devout one. And in terms of conspiracy potential, I mean, besides catfishing, burger pants, dog's innocent as a fly. So let's rate him one particularly innocent fly out of 10. You know what time it is. He's cosmically fated to be stuck in retail, and we don't even know his name. Give a big round of applause for Burger Pants. So for most characters, I feel pretty comfortable saying they're not a Deltarunist if they don't show up to church. But I am going to make the call that Burger Pants is actually a Deltarunist, and I have a few reasons for this. First and foremost, he's friends with Chris and Asriel, and they seem to have made most of their friends through the church. The second is they just have the vibe of a Deltarunist. He's definitely not part of any big conspiracies, though, because and my dude is trapped in customer service hell. He can't go to real hell. He's all out of vacation days. So let's give Burger Pants 0.1 hours of accrued PTO and move on to the next guys. Technically, they're 5 guys, but they're always seen in a group. That's right. It's the Wet-Nosed Bandit. So the Wet-Nosed Bandits love crime and probably not organized religion. They also seem too innocent to be really in on any of these dark deeds going on around town, so they're probably unrelated on both counts. But I do find it very interesting that the Wet-Nosed Bandits are criminals. Not only were they like town guards in Undertale, we have a whole family of cats who are very religious and a whole family of dogs who are wicked criminals. But we've got an evil cat following Chris around in the dark world, and a goofy little dog following Chris around as well. Just something to think about. I refuse to give dogs ratings. That's the domain of the worst Twitter account, so we're just gonna move on. And that means we move on to... She's not here, but she is queer. Literally, where is she? She's in the bunker. That's right, it's Undyne. So Undyne is a Deltarunist. She just, wasn't at church because she was being kidnapped. She didn't recognize the knight, though. Maybe because she didn't get a good look at it. But it's probably because the prophecy's a little bit vague. And unless Undyne is a much better actor than I thought she would be, she is not involved with the conspiracy because the knight literally kidnapped her and took her into the bunker. But the question is, was she tangentially involved with the conspiracy? Like, was she given the code to the bunker, or did that stay with Asgore? Because if so, it was a little bit of a I can't believe leopards ate my face situation, huh? Let's give her one fulfilled relationship out of 2 universes and move on to the ghosty with the mosty. Lines of dialogue, that is. That's right. It's Napstablook. So Napstablook is probably not involved either religiously or conspiracy-wise. If you remember in Undertale, one of his big jokes was that he was the only person who wasn't taken in by the whole Asriel thing He just sort of ignored it. And Loke, I think that is kind of what is going on with Hanabstablook. He's just not involved. So let's give Blukey a score out of 10 and move on to the next one. It's the musical genius, Shiren. Shiren is a Deltarunist. She's in the choir. And her mother is buried right next to the church. Probably too unimportant to be part of the conspiracy, though. Let's give her a standing ovation out of 10, which means it's time. For he's in the hospital, and he's surrounded with controversy. That's right, you know him. You're slightly suspicious of him, or you're not. That's right, it's Rudolph Holiday. So, Rudolph, obviously, he's at church. He's a Deltarunist. I get the feeling that he was actually pretty involved in the church before his illness. But that's not why you're coming to the Rudy section in a Deltarune analysis, right? You want to hear about the conspiracy part. Now, I am a bit of a Rudy Knight truther. I kind of like both Death Knight and Rudy Knight. I just think Rudy Knight makes more sense in terms of just like pure story. Like, you want to introduce your villain early, and we don't really hear about Death until chapter 2. And there's the whole Lost Girl thing going on in the code. Also, I think less engaged players won't know anything about Death. She is still a pretty low-key character, even at chapter 4. But if we put aside Rudy Knight and just assume that someone else is the Knight, would he be involved in the conspiracy if he wasn't the Knight? If he was just Noel's terminally ill dad? Would Carol let him in on the whole thing that she's got plotting? I really think she wouldn't, right? Like, the church scene in chapter 4 kind of implies that they're on bad terms at the moment. He might be kind of aware of it, but like how Toriel is, she's kind of kept in the dark. I have no idea, though. Can't wait to find out. Let's give Mr. Holiday a 99 blaze potions out of 99 blaze potions. We will not be using one. That means it's time for she's the receptionist at the hospital. Spends a fortune on toothpaste. It's Big Mouth. So she seems entirely unrelated to the plot. So I'm just going to take a moment to complain about this list. Do you know what the list calls the doctors? They call them white wizards. That's just because Warrior is a freak. The white wizards are the doctors. Also, this list doesn't have Carol. What do you mean it doesn't have Carol in the list of all lightners? You have Milk Freak, but not Carol? You have Diamond Head, but not Carol? Let's give Big Mouth one bad wiki article out of 10. That means it's time for the most normal NPC on this list. He loves the books, especially the books upstairs. Wait, it's Normal NPC. That's his name in the code. So, Normal NPC. Probably not a Deltarunist. I barely know if he's sentient, but he is most certainly the most goner of the goners that are running around Hometown. Like, he's been deliberately placed in front of the upstairs library to prevent us from learning more information before it's relevant. And he seems to be degrading every single time that you talk to him per chapter. His dialogue is the same, but gets continuously more messed up. I don't think Dog is making to chapter 7, let's be honest. So let's give the normal NPC a score of the books upstairs out of what? It's time for the Bergen Truckin' himself, drinker of the 7 ice-cold beers. Kind of a deadbeat dad at the moment, but I think he'll pull through it. That's right, it's Asgore Dreamer. So once again, I think Asgore is incredibly religious, and there's a few things I can point at. First of all, he goes to the evening services at church, but also the name of his flower shop is Flower King Flowers, right? The Flower King is a character from the prophecy, and we know Asgore has read the prophecy. So from all our perspective, the prophecy is saying, oh, there's this Flower King Flowers, and the Flower King's gonna get trapped in asylum. And it's actually kind of the other way around. Asgore probably named the shop after Flower King, who got trapped in asylum. Also, this completely recontextualizes what the Flower King flower means. Imagine going to a farm supply called Job's Farm and Supply. You would assume that person is a little religious, right? But he's also involved in the conspiracy. He doesn't seem like a full member of the conspiracy, though. Like, first off, he's not the best dad in the world, but there is like a 0% chance that he's letting Chris risk their life. By all we can figure, figure. He's doing all of this to reunite with Chris, Azzy, and Toriel. Prophecy does not end well. They're not putting Chris under that type of smoke. And also, it seems like he has to sneak into Carol's room to look at her conspiracy board. And he seems completely unaware of the whole Undyne situation. Low-key, I think they're keeping him around to be the fall guy. But we can't tell till Chapter 5 releases so soon. So let's give him 1 doomed by the narrative out of 10 and switch over to the next one. And switching on over to, it's the start of the QC Diners section, everybody. Get ready for some unimportant NPCs, and we're gonna start with the number 1, the only Waitress Lion. So once again, I don't think she's a Deltarunist. 1, she's trans, and trans people don't tend to be religious. Likewise, I don't think she's involved with the dark plot. She's trans, she can't be evil. So let's give her 1 Pride Month out of 12. And it is on to... I actually had to look up a picture of this NPC because I did not know them. It's the Tentacled Monster. So if you're wondering by that description, oh, does Neon have any deep or insightful views on the Tentacled Monster? No. She did go to Gerson's class back in the day. That's interesting. She might be a little religious because of that, but I had a religious social studies teacher as well, and I'm not. So we'll say she's not a Deltarunist. And unless she's part of the conspiracy that we're not involved with whatsoever, she's not part of the dark plot either. So let's give her a good aesthetic out of 10, and this is who the diner is named after. It's QC. I'm actually low-key surprised that QC wasn't at church because she's based off of the shopkeeper in Undertale, who does have a prominently displayed Deltarune. I'm willing to say that she goes to the night mass with Asgore, but I am not willing to say that she's part of the conspiracy. 1, she seems to have a soft spot for Susie, and this is a very Susie antagonistic conspiracy from what we can tell. And 2, she has a day job that keeps her at one location. Kinda hard to be operating your dark schemes when you're stuck behind the counter at a restaurant. So let's give QC a $5 hot chocolate and move on. Matriarch of the Kattenheimer family. Probably has the least amount of dialogue between all of them. It's Mrs. Kattenheimer. Basically everything I said about Mr. Kattenheimer, you can say about Mrs. Kattenheimer as well. Is a Deltarunist, not part of the conspiracy. I think it's delightful that she loves her family so much. Let's give her a man, there are a lot of Kattenheimers out of 6. And shift over to the next one. A menace among the furry community. This guy loves ice and ice-related things. It's Ice Wolf. Ice Wolf, not a Deltarunist. And probably not part of any of the conspiracies. Although, he does mention that he is a big fan of ices. Will he come under the thrall of Icy's eldritch madness? Probably not. Let's give Ice Wolf 1 disproportionately large and thirsty fan base out of 10. She's got a great design, but not a lot of relevance to the story. It's Fire Elemental. I love how the elementals look in the UTDR universe, but it doesn't seem like she's a Deltarunist or part of the conspiracy. So let's give her peak out of 10. Just a reminder, after this, all of the characters are pretty important to the story. So just grit your teeth and bear it, which you know who's doing that. That's right. It's Ficus Liquor. Okay, so Ficus Liquor, probably not a Deltarunist, but at least 4 times in his life, he's accidentally wandered into a church and felt terrible and sat through an entire sermon and felt like he couldn't leave till it was over. He's not part of a conspiracy, but it would be very funny if he wandered into like the evil group chat and was just sort of like looking on in horror. Caster noticing him after like an hour and being like, was this guy always here? Ficus Liquor gets 6.27 out of 9.38215. He's a family man, and he has a horde. That's right, it's Dad Dragon and the rest of his family who aren't on this list for some reason. So the dragons aren't Deltarunists. I doubt the whole family's in the conspiracy either. Let's give them 1 horde out of 10. He stores pancakes in his hat. That's his whole thing. It's Hat Monster. Not a Deltarunist, not in the conspiracy. Cute little dude though. 6 out of 10. I'm willing to bet this was probably the least popular of all of the Undertale monsters. He loves to bulk up. It's Aaron. Aaron is a lot less bulky in this than he is in Undertale, though. He's not a Deltarunist. or a part of the conspiracy. Let's give him a bad vibes out of 10 still. And we are outside of the QC Diner, and that takes us to the last on this list. It's the school, and we are gonna start with the mysterious, enigmatic Temmie. Okay, so Temmie, when you really start to think about it, is very suspicious. Like, she's probably not a Deltarunist, and I don't know if she's involved in the conspiracy. I've talked a few times about this, but like, she's literally an avatar of one of the artists. And in a game where there are two weird creatures running around, one is a dog, one is a cat. Temmie has both cat and dog ears. She's somehow both. But in Deltarune, she is hiding her cat ears under a hat. Plus, she has that weird association with eggs. She was associated with eggs before even the man behind the tree. She literally interacts with the secret eggs that you place as well. She also knows about the song that plays at the end of Deltarune Chapter 1. I'd say that's enough red flags to be a little suspicious of her and her role, but she's still a great design with a funny gimmick, so we're gonna give her a 9 out of 10. Now it's time for one of the more normal classmates in this school. He has a much better relationship with his dad and still has a dead mom. You know it. That's right, it's Snowy. So Snowy's family is Deltarunist. It's, obvious. We've already talked about that. I'm definitely too young to be part of the conspiracy. But the real question is, did Snowy know Des? I mean, he had to, right? Is he aware that they disappeared? Or have any inkling as to why? He's been in hometown about the same amount of time as Chris and Noel, from what I can tell. So they probably did interact with Noel's older sister. But I digress. Let's give Snowy one future comedy career out of one probably not disappointed father. And that brings us to one of the most iconic characters in the entire series. She's gayer than Pride Month, and probably has as many video essays written about her as Sans Undertale. You've probably figured this out by now. It's Noel Holiday. Okay, so I kind of think Noel's kind of the most devoutly religious character in the series. Which is funny, because it means poor Noel has been worshipping her gremlin childhood friend and crush. Although I think if the events of Deltarune didn't happen, I don't think her faith would have lasted past college. She's got that religious trauma vibe, But that might just be all of the other trauma vibes she has, and she's religious. There, of course, is, I think, the near universal theory that Noel is part of the prophecy itself, one of the heroes. The real question is she the girl with hope crossed her heart, or at last the girl. And I've heard a lot of people talking about how she's probably the girl with hope crossed her heart, because, she's hopeful. But I do think that there is a good argument to be made that she is at last the girl and last the girl. And I think this mainly because the last girl really calls to mind to me the final girl. The trope in horror movies where the girl survives at the very end and is the one who finally gets away or defeats the villain. Final girls are even stereotypically blonde as well. That could also explain why the weird root is like it is. The soul is trying to piggyback on Noel's survivor status, maybe even get strong enough to change things. That does contain within it the implication that the rest of the Lancer Fun Squad don't survive. I do really want to get Noel's reaction to learning that Susie and Chris are heroes from the prophecy. I think that would be a really fun scene, but I don't think she's part of the conspiracy. Like, it doesn't work on any level, right? One, I'm pretty sure her mom is deliberately manipulating the conspiracy to keep her out of whatever is happening. Maybe going as far as trying to substitute Susie for Noel. That's why she's trying to keep Susie and Noel apart, so that Noel doesn't get sad when Susie gets slimed out. But there is a conspiracy against her, right? It's a little bit of a weird one, though. That's right. The weird route, when the soul, us, uses our meta-entity status to mess with a child for some reason. And once again, you can make theories about the weird route until the cows come home. I already made one just now in this video. I'm just saying, if all of the characters were playing Deltarune, the only character who would find and do the weird route
route is ironically Noel.
She is literally being trapped in a creepypasta of her own making. But I could talk about Noel for hours. I'm part of the problem, see? So I think it's fair to give Noel a ranking of 4th hero out of 3 and move on to. He was formerly a kid, but he dropped his stripe and is now kind of grown up, but not quite yet. It's Monster Teen. Monster Teen is incredibly similar to Snowy. Both a Deltarunist, you see him in church, and probably not part of the conspiracy. But I do want to say it is a little bit odd that Monster Kid is one of the only children that we don't know whose parents they are. And the other ones whose parents we don't know have other things going on about them. Like Temmie probably doesn't have parents because she's a meta entity. Jockington is like melting or something. And even Birdley has that universal mother thing going on, right? It's just Monster Teen, who's just, we don't know their parents. But other than that, they're pretty normal. And because of that, let's give Monster Teen a 5.5 out of 10, the statistical average of rolling a 10-sided dice. And now it's time for the king of sports, the snake who is great, Caddy's longtime and dedicated partner. You know him, you love him. It's Jockington. So Jockington isn't a Deltarunist, but substitutes for Caddy for some reason. So he probably knows a bit about the prophecy, but isn't too devout, which is odd because his name appears in the prophecy. Like, you have to remember, the prophecy has been around for presumably years and years, maybe even hundreds of years, thousands even. So his parents had to be like, yeah, we're gonna name our child Jockington from the Bible. I'm assuming this is like naming your child Ezekiel or Solomon. He is also weirdly connected to the conspiracies as well. Specifically, I think the Gaster side, where his speech is starting to disintegrate. If you noticed, he is way weirder in Chapter 4. I think whatever's happening to the normal NPC might be happening to Jockington. And because of that, let's give Jockington 1 suspiciously raised eyebrow out of 10. The last member of the Kattenheimer family, the youngest and the gothest, it's Caddy. Caddy should be less important than she is, right? Like, she's kind of in the thick of it, despite not having a lot of screen time. Like, friends with Noel and Chris, comes from a family of very devout Deltarunists, is friends with Jockington, so she presumably knows the prophecy. And on terms of the eviler end of what is going on in Hometown, she and Chris studied occult together and summoned a demon. She doesn't think it worked, but I think you and I know that something was summoned. Let's give her 1 doomed love triangle out of 10. And now it's time for the frozen chicken. The bird who's a nerd. You really gotta be in deep if you like Birdley. That's right, it's Birdley.
Strangely enough, Birdley is the only Lightner who's not in the prophecy who enters a dark world. Does that mean anything? I have no clue. And while Birdley wasn't at church, I do think he's a Deltarunist for one major reason. He plays Dragon Blazers, which, if you recall, is based off of Lord of the Hammer, which, if you recall, is based off of the prophecy. So once again, if we have been thinking of Lord of the Hammer as Lord of the Rings, but it's closer to Narnia, then we should be thinking of Dragon Blazers less like a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest, and more like a Christian game or a media tie-in game, like Aragon or the Narnia video game. I think he's also probably not connected to any of the conspiracies. It's probably one of the reasons we could snowgrave him, because he's not tied to the darkness or any of the prophecy. So for that, let's give Birdley a frozen chicken out of a roasted chicken, and it is on to she's a bad teacher and a mediocre scientist. I kind of dislike her, but she's not nearly as bad as some people make her out to be. That's right, it's Alphys. Now, Alphys is not a Deltarunist. That's why Undyne takes her to church to try and get her into a community. Not somewhere she goes normally, but she is a college-educated woman. She probably does know about the prophecy, right? And likewise, I think she's too new to the town to be in on the conspiracy. But I do think that she's picking up on bad vibes. Like, she's scared of the bunker, and presumably would have to be a little suspicious of Carol. And I think she's going to be the first person to notice that Undyne is just gone. She might actually become a pretty valuable asset for the heroes. So let's give Alphys a 7 incredibly mad people online out of 10. And now that is technically the end of the list on the wiki, but I think you'll notice some glaring omissions from this list, and we're gonna talk about those.
First off, she is the GOAT. Literally the first character you see in Deltarune and the second you see in Undertale. It's Toriel. I literally almost missed Toriel because she wasn't on this whack list, but she is incredibly religious. I think she could probably recite most of the prophecy just like normally, and she is not part of the conspiracy. I think the main reason she was kept asleep during most of Chapter 3 is because the dark forces did not want her looking at Chris and Susie and being like, oh, that is the cage made of human soul parts and the girl with hope crossed her heart. Oh no, the prophecy's coming true. Which has some strange implications, but I am not equipped to go into them. Also, she's not a part of the conspiracy because she loves Chris and would never hurt them. She also probably loves Susie and Noel. She seems like a very loving person, despite what the internet will tell you. She's not a bad parent. She's just a single parent who is being stalked by her ex and is unequipped to raise a depressed teen that is literally a different species and being possessed by an eldritch entity. So let's give Toriel 7 billion pieces of sus fan art out of 10. And it's time for probably the mastermind of it all. The goat with the note. She's not a goat. She's a reindeer. The mayor of the town. It's Carol. So like Carol is religious, right? She might not be at church, but her daughter is like in choir and her husband is going to church even though he should be in the hospital recovering. I think she's not going to church because she is part of the conspiracy. If not literally the head of the conspiracy, she's head of the town, she's head of the conspiracy. And I think we don't have great insight into her motivations because she has appeared in exactly one scene.
So this is just raw speculation. But I think Carol or Des or someone found a dark fountain or created a dark fountain. Carol realized, oh god, the prophecy is real. Oh god, I have the only child with hope crossed their heart in this town. We need to get a substitute ASAP. And she saw Susie, not realizing that Susie was always the girl with hope crossed her heart. And Noel was the final girl, which I don't even think that Carol might have known was a thing. But that's my raw speculation for part of Carol's tragic backstory. A big part of Undertale and Deltarune is finding empathy in even the worst people. So I don't think she's going to be like an unredeemable monster for very long. So let's give Carol one pretty evocative design out of 10 and move over to our penultimate character. She's been called the best character in Deltarune. She's a rude girl with a cool tude. You know her. You can kind of play as her. She's Susie. So Susie didn't know anything about Deltarunism until she realized that she was literally the messiah of the series. And she's not part of any conspiracy, except for as like the main victim of it. Ironically, Susie is so important that there's not a lot to talk about with her because everything has kind of already been said. Let's give Susie one excellent character arc out of 10, and we are going to the final character. They are in every scene of this game. They take on both the heroic role and the antagonistic role. We know tons about them, but nothing at all. It's Chris Dreamer. So Chris is a Deltarunist and has been their entire life.
So when they're going through this entire adventure, they low-key know what's going on. It also means that we're now the only character in the main lot that doesn't know how the prophecy ends. So that's a little annoying, isn't it? And of course, Chris is in on the conspiracy, and they're obviously feeling pretty guilty about it. So it was obviously something they did that roped them into the conspiracy. And people have been talking about what they did for ages. I think we're going to wait till Chapter 5 and find out a little bit more. And we're going to wrap this up giving Chris 2 intact arms out of 10. Let's hope nothing changes that, huh? And that was my brief analysis of every lightner in Deltarune and of what they know. I'm not gonna lie, this series ended up being way more than I expected it to be. Especially, I was expecting Deltarune Chapter 5 to release around Christmas, so this was going to be a slow and steady mega video that I released around then that got a little rushed a little quickly. I hope you enjoyed it. It was pretty fun to make, thanks to Field Memory for the music like always. Other than that, like if you want to, subscribe if you want to, comment if you want to. I'm not your dad, I can't tell you to do anything. But I will tell you to have a wonderful day. You better have a wonderful day. I'm gonna make you have a wonderful day, you get it? Bye-bye.